Well, hello. Let's start a little early today. I do have to be at work tonight, so I scheduled this for 2. Was supposed to be 1. Was going to be 8 o'clock last night, but I fell asleep. I had a great night's sleep. I'm drinking my afternoon/morning coffee, so I can go to work tonight. But before I go to work tonight, I want to do a quick review. I always say quick, and it ends up being 2 hours. This is not a 2-hour review. This is about a 15-minute video, so I can't imagine it going longer than an hour and a half, maybe. And it's an interesting video because it's something that I've watched before, but I kind of forgot about it. It does mention me, but somebody had pointed it out to me the other day. I'm like, yeah, I remember this video. In fact, I think I actually knew the caller. I think the caller's on my Facebook today. So it'd be an interesting review of this video because, like I said, I had heard it before, and I was like, oh yeah, I definitely want to show you guys this particular video, this particular call. Before I do, a couple things to get out of the way from Twitter. If you guys have been following me on Twitter, if not, why aren't you following me on Twitter? You should. If you guys have been following the John Richardson kerfuffle, here's a guy. If you guys don't know John Richardson, he was involved with the Atheist Alliance International debacle when they took that over and they just kind of screwed everybody. But he didn't have much to do with it. I mean, I give him that. He was a nobody in there because they don't give him any empowerment to do anything because he's just not a bright guy. But he's the guy that believes that the law of identity doesn't hold in reality. That A equals A isn't true in reality because of some kind of weird temporal component that doesn't exist. And he doesn't understand Leibniz' identity of indistinguishability or identicals. So he doesn't get any of those principles that two objects have the same properties of the same object, or if a property has all the same objects of itself. So he doesn't hold true to the law of identity for some strange reason. He says it's true, but isn't true in reality, whatever that means. But worse than that, there's something. Well, I don't know if it's worse than that. Maybe worse to a biologist. He's the atheist that argues that animals evolved from plants. Yeah, you heard it right. I'm not misunderstanding his argument. He holds that Animalia is an offshoot of Plantae, or plant kingdom, and so he has this weird argument for it, which is based upon a gross misunderstanding of things like chloroplast and chlorophyll and protistas and photosynthesis and chemoheterotropic animals. He has a gross misunderstanding of colonial protistas, and so he doesn't understand that animals are a different kingdom than plants completely. They diverged millions of years ago. And one did not come from the other. They came from a common ancestry, which is a single species that they all came from. That's true. The last common ancestor was neither animal nor plant, but animals did not evolve from plants. No biologist thinks this way. No textbook will ever say this. Nowhere is this ever in evolutionary theory. He thinks that all biologists agree with him. I've asked him for one. He cannot produce any. So it's kind of fun. If you guys want to get away from flat Earth and you want to see atheist flat Earth level argumentation, go on my Twitter feed and watch John Richards argue that animals evolved from plants. It is just mind blowing. Yeah, I mean, I think not accepting the law of identity is probably worse as a logic person, basic logic person. Only because, as Kibamaki points out, if you don't accept the law of identity, everything else just kind of falls apart. I mean, that's the one thing that even Aristotle wouldn't say wasn't true. I mean, certain philosophers can deny the law of excluded middle. Certain philosophers can deny law of non-contradiction, which is perfectly fine. There are other types of logic where they don't have things like law of excluded middle or law of non-contradiction. These are called paraconsistent, diatheistic logics, or they're called gap logic or glute logic, where you have these gaps where you don't have to have the law of excluded middle. But long story short, I think the argument that animals evolved from plants is kind of funny. I mean, it's flat Earth level stuff, right? I mean, nobody agrees with this guy, but as a atheist has some name recognition, has spewing the dumbest arguments you've ever heard. You guys want to go check it out. All right. With that said, let's kind of review this. So this was on a show called The Hang Up. It's a show I do not watch, mainly for the fact that I find Jimmy Snow to be an insufferable douchebag. And I think that he's arrogant and ignorant, and he's just a nasty person. But I think this particular episode if I'm not mistaken, that's their show. I don't know. Maybe that's the line. I don't know. I don't remember which one's the line, which one's the hang up. I don't even care. Maybe this is just Matt Dillahunty's show. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But anyways, I don't watch the hang up either. But this was the call about a year ago from a guy named Lucas from Texas. Yeah, I didn't go off the top. Well, yeah, I was. Yes, somebody said you were off the top 10 in Grifties. Only come back strong first. Any words? Yeah, my minions work hard on that. Actually, I made a call out to them. I said this is unacceptable. I dropped down like 140 because what they're doing is, I think what happened is they may not count bot counts, and so every so often they purge the bots to give you a real indicator of what the actual things are, but. Yeah, I told my people to go out there, give me number one, because that's a lot of publicity. I mean, those guys have a 72,000 sub channel called Hope Tip Nation. They have the Grifties, which is a smaller channel, which is only about 3,000, 4,000 subs, somewhere in that ballpark. But their main channel is quite larger because they're called Hope Tip Nation or Order Men of Order, but. Yeah, that'd be awesome to win that. I mean, I already arranged with Molly Golightly and Charlotte that whoever wins, we'll all go get it together. That'd be great. So, all right. Let's dive into this. So, I'm gonna give you the too long didn't read version first. Matt agrees with me, as he should, if he right. But this is going to be a call about agnostic atheist, and I had told people ages ago that Matt no longer identifies as an agnostic atheist. He stopped using that term somewhere around 2017, if I'm not mistaken. He actually has said that on the Iron, even though it's on the Iron Chariots webpage, he finds the phrase agnostic atheist to be nonsensical. His words don't make a lot of sense. His words do not make a lot of sense, which means nonsensical in that particular word combination. In the weak case, and he's absolutely right in this. And I've argued this from ages on end. Matter of fact, there has been many people who have taken my work and ran with it. And I know a lot of my arguments got back to him because we have a lot of mutual friends. So I've been sounding this off on the Agnostic Atheist, I think, longer before anybody else. I know there are other people that have also weighed in on this and come to the same conclusion I have, which somebody like Walden Green, excellent philosophy person. He has a whole page on agnostic atheism. Pretty much comes to the same conclusions I've came to. Joe from Answers and Reason and Trolley Dave, they have written up on this as well, come to the same conclusions. I know they base their stuff. I know Joe based a lot of stuff off my work, and I'm flattered. But I do think that a lot of my writings about agnostic atheist, from a logical and epistemically rational point of view, don't make a lot of sense, and why that I think that atheists shouldn't use those terms. And Matt no longer does, and he explains in this video why he no longer accepts agnostic atheist as being something that should be used. Okay, so let's dive into that. And like I said, it's 15 minutes, so it shouldn't be too long, but we'll go from there. All right, let's do. Make sure you guys can hear this when I start playing it, and here we go.
Lucas, pronouns are he, him in Texas.
Oh God, that's
and
loud.
So disagrees with me about something. So let's see if we actually disagree, or if one of us is misunderstood, or
sorry, that might be a
let's
little
get the
loud.
questions going. How you doing, Lucas?
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Pretty good. How's it going with you?
Hello. It's going good, man.
It's going good.
I'm happy to be talking to you.
I do think I know Lucas, but I'm not positive.
I call in about one thing that I specifically disagree with you. I do want to say real quick, I've been listening this whole time. The guy with the Chick-fil-A thing earlier,
I don't know what that's
maybe
referring
this makes me a bad person.
I like
but
Chick-fil-A, though.
love
I hate their politics, obviously. Their politics are crap.
I said I like their sandwiches. I just don't like their politics.
Yeah, thank you. And by the way,
So what is it?
I forgot that he even said that in this. I kind of play at 1/2 speed usually. I forgot that this was in there just now. I happen to agree with Matt on that, by the way. Chick-fil-A has really good sandwiches, and their sauce is magnifique. However, their politics is absolute crap. And so you could differentiate between the food and their politics, and I happen to agree with Matt on that.
You think I got wrong, Lucas?
I'm really ignorant about their politics. So it's maybe not something I think you got wrong, just something I maybe don't understand. I've seen a lot of stuff about where you say the label agnostic atheism or agnostic atheist is not a useful label.
Okay, so he's telling Matt agnostic atheism is not a useful label, which I absolutely agree with. Now, Matt makes a minor little caveat in here about what utility it might have, which I will grant, but it's minor and insignificant, and it doesn't outweigh the problems with using such terminology that has such ambiguity. So you have to weigh the pros and the cons. If you use such terms as agnostic atheist, the chances of somebody understanding what the hell you're talking about, especially in an academic or philosophical community, they're probably not going to know what you're referring to because it has multiple different things that I've seen used for it, and just logically, it's ambiguous.
And if you disagree with that, let me know.
No, it's not a useful label.
Thank you. First thing, Steve was right. I have said for a long time, agnostic atheism is not a useful label. I have 3-4 blogs on it, which you can read in the video description. I would request, if you are interested in why this is the case, and you really do want to learn the logic and the philosophy behind why so many people are coming to the conclusion that agnostic atheism is not a useful label, and why it has ambiguity, and at the best case is superfluous, but in the worst case it's ambiguous and nonsensical. I say at the worst case it's nonsensical, but it's definitely ambiguous. If you want to learn those things, then go read my blogs on it, because I think I have them pretty well written out, and then go from there.
I guess I don't understand why it's not a useful label, because
Sure.
I think as far as communicating with theists, the difference between agnostic atheist and Gnostic atheist is a big deal, in my opinion.
Okay. So theism and atheism address belief. Are you convinced there's a God? If the answer is yes, you're a theist. If the answer is no, you're not convinced, you're an atheist.
All right. Now, we all know I disagree with Matt on that. What Matt is not explaining to people properly is this is how he's using these terms. He's making a categorical statement, which he thinks is appropriate for all branches of philosophy, which is not. Okay. Nowhere in philosophy what he said is true. Nowhere. Nowhere is that true. Now, are there people that use it in those terms? Sure. But it's atypical and not normative, meaning that it's not normal, or that you ought not to use it that way, because if you do use it that way, you're going to be misunderstanding the context of the paper. If you see the word atheism in a peer-reviewed paper, it's not going to be using the way Matt uses it almost 99% of the time. So he's not telling people, this is how we use it at the ACA, this is how we use it at the hang-up, this is how I use it. But he's making a categorical statement that if you're not a theist, you must be an atheist. And that is absolutely wrong. It's only within the local schema by which his logic is. But in a global necessity, there's no metaphysical, logical, or epistemic necessity whatsoever to be an atheist if you're not a theist. Matter of fact, it's just, it makes no sense, but he hasn't got that far yet to acknowledge that. Progress, though, this whole thing about agnostic atheism is progress, but he hasn't gotten to the realization that his usages are pretty silly. But whatever, baby steps, right? So the logic would be very simple: theist or not theist. For any kind of negation, all you do is need to put it is not the case or not. So if I have theist, it is or is not the case, you're a theist. Now he's saying that if you're not the case, you're a theist, you are automatically, by his usages, an atheist. Okay, but not by my usages, and not by academic usages, not by philosophical usages, and certainly not by the vast majority, if not every single paper out there, besides maybe one or two. But they're all mostly opinion pieces that I've read. I don't think I've ever read a paper where they uses atheism the way he does. That's not an opinion piece. Stephen Dillahunty, who's a theist, who is the editor of the Oxford Handbook of Atheism, it was a Handbook of Atheism. He writes an opinion piece in the Handbook of Atheism. Martin, who promoted negative atheism, Michael Martin, promoted Michael Martin, who recognized it was not normative. He recognized that the standard was the belief that God does not exist. Anthony Flew. And then there was Smith, who wrote A Case Against God, who I don't think ever wrote a paper directly relating to this that I've read. But either or, they're all opinion pieces. They're all relating to how they think the word should be used rather than how it is actually used. And so his statement right there is not correct as far as philosophy.
Gnosticism and agnosticism address knowledge.
Now, that statement you hear a lot on the ACAs, but they're ACA programs, but that's completely false. That statement right there is not even true in any reality I've ever seen. It is a gross misunderstanding of the terminologies, because the term agnosticism never, ever dealt with knowledge, ever. I find me one place that ever deals with knowledge. It may deal with the question of knowability relating to a God in the epistemological domain, but the term agnosticism was coined by Thomas Henry Huxley to represent a different position, that you should not believe anything without proper scientific grounds. It was an evidentialist position, that you have no justification for believing whether God exists or not, even in any case, if there's no scientific reasoning for it. And he doesn't think that theist nor atheist has scientific grounding to believe or disbelieve that God exists. So he created the term agnosticism. It wasn't about knowledge. It was about believing God exists, not knowing. So Matt is wrong about that. He's also wrong about Gnosticism. Gnosticism was a philosophical belief that was prevalent after the Hellenistic period of Greece. It was pretty much predominant in the 1st and 4th century. But Gnosticism, the term gnos, is not epistemic knowledge. The term gnos, N-O-S, or Gnostic, gnos is actually the reason why Thomas Henry Huxley coined the term agnosticism. He wanted to have the representation of the illusion of having knowledge. So it wasn't about knowledge, it was about the illusion of having knowledge about something that they do not have. So knowledge would be a subset of belief. So if you can't have knowledge about something, you certainly, I shouldn't say that. You still could have belief, but he was trying to relate it that you're not justified either way. You're not justified to make knowledge kind of claims. And it was all relating to the fact that he thought everything should be based upon scientific grounding. It was basically a method. It was called a normative epistemic method. And so when I say non-normative, that means something that you not ought. Normative epistemic method would be what you ought to use. And that was his belief that things should be grounded in science. But anyways, Gnosticism was a belief that there was this aeon called Sophia that fell from heaven, called Pleroma, if I pronounce that right. But basically, Sophia instilled in everybody this divine spark, and this divine spark was knowledge, that this unknown God existed that created everything in the universe. And this particular, or actually it created the heavens, I'm sorry, this particular unknown God created the heavens, but didn't create this universe we're in now. The universe we're in now was created by a trickster God called Yaldabaoth. And that knowledge that was instilled in all of us was information to let us know that we're not in heaven. We're not we're not worshiping a true God by this God called Yaldabaoth, which was originally, or later on, I believe, came the Christian God, Yahweh. And so Jesus was some kind of messenger in the Gnostic belief, that Jesus was letting people know, hey, the unknown God is what the God is of the heavens. And Sophia was called the syzygy of Jesus, the female counterpart of Jesus. So Gnosticism gets into all these esoteric beliefs. So it has nothing to do with knowledge as what we mean by epistemic knowledge. When I say I know that I'm drinking coffee, that's not what Gnosticism ever meant. That's not what agnosticism ever meant. I challenge Matt Dillahunty to find one person, one epistemologist that has ever seen Gnosticism used in the context that he's using it. So, all right, moving on.
Knowledge is necessarily a subset of belief.
That is
here's
true.
The group of things I believe, and there's some subset of those things which I also assert that I know.
And that is true. And that's another thing that a lot of atheists mess up on. Knowledge in a belief first knowledge theory, such as justified true belief or justified true belief plus, knowledge is a subset of belief. A lot of people get that wrong. A lot of atheists do not wrap their head around that properly. They'll insist, no. Knowledge is a subset of belief. No, they're confused. They are using information as a synonym for knowledge, and they're not the same thing. Knowledge has a very specific prescriptive, not descriptive, but prescriptive meaning in justified true belief, because there has to be 3 necessary conditions which are prescriptive for knowledge. But they'll argue, well, you have to know about something before you can believe it. No, you have to have information about something before you can believe it. You have to be aware of something. That's not the same as knowledge in the philosophical sense. And so they're equivocating the word knowledge by epistemological usage to information.
If atheism is not a positive claim,
Which it is.
in the sense of there is no God,
Which
but
it is.
instead is the rejection of the not being convinced of the assertion that there is a God, then there's nothing to know.
By the way, rejection actually means to believe false in philosophy. In colloquial, yes, reject means to not accept. I get that. But in logic, if you say I reject P, it means you believe P is false. So you hold P is false or P is false. So there's a distinction to be made when you have words that are used in a specific domain of discourse as opposed to colloquial. However, in this particular case, he's arguing correctly as far as if you do not have a belief position, if atheism is the weak case, if weak atheism is held as atheism, it makes no sense then to try to epistemically modify it with a word agnostic or gnostic dealing with knowledge, because you don't have a belief first, and to have a knowledge you must have belief first. So he is right on this, by the way. And by the way, this is the same argument I made many times long before he changed his position to people that I know Matt, and I know Matt has had these conversations with these people. Now, I'm not going to take claim that I changed Matt Dillahunty's mind, but I can safely say without question, I know that there are people that know Matt, that know my arguments, that he's had conversations with. He's admitted that he's had conversations with certain people and he's changed his position on this. And where do you think a lot of them got their arguments from? How many people out there have been saying agnostic atheism is nonsensical for what, half a decade? Not very many, okay? There's basically me and Ozymandias. Yeah.
And so if you said you're an agnostic, like you're saying,
we got an ad.
I don't believe there's a God. And so what is the knowledge part? There's no.
Right. And he's right on that. If you're saying I don't believe, there's nothing that you can do for knowledge, right? Because you have to have I believe before you can say I know. Because belief is a requirement for knowledge, because knowledge is a subset of belief. He's absolutely right. And I made a mistake on one of my last videos. I actually said belief is a subset of knowledge, and I did correct that. Somebody actually pointed out and they said, "Hey, did you misspeak there?" And I said I did. I pinned the correction. So thank you for that. See, people do pay attention, and they notice if you make a mistake, which is just, it happens. But we know the concepts. That's why we can say, well, yeah, we messed up. Hey, Christopher Green. Yeah, yes, Christopher. An advocate for awareness, an internalist position. Yes. Hey, I got nothing against internalism. Go talk to David Pullman. He's a big internalist. I got no issues with internalism. I can switch back and forth, though. I'm one of those weird people. I can go from internalism to externalism and not even care. Pick a justification.
There's no knowledge claim there, because there can only be knowledge and there can only be belief for a proposition.
True.
And if atheism, the non-theistic, the soft atheism perspective.
Now, I appreciate that he did this, and I want people to be aware of this. You notice how he said the soft position. See, Matt knows these things. And this is why I don't think Matt's stupid. Okay? I think he might be a little bit intellectually dishonest sometimes, but I don't think he's stupid. And I don't think he's unaware of these subject matter. Matt has studied these things, or at least he's at least learned them from other people. Aaron doesn't understand this. I mean, no offense to Aaron. Aaron doesn't understand the philosophy at all. Matt does, and this is why I'm a little bit probably harder on Matt, because he knows better. But he knows how he does say soft position, right? Because he does advocate that weak atheism is atheism. Now, he has not refuted my argument, my atheist semantic collapse argument, that if you do this, if you do accept weak atheism as atheism, then it leads to semantic collapse. And he has not assailed my WASP argument that Ozzy had been, I guess, talking about in a Discord for hours a couple weeks ago, a couple days ago, whatever it was, and nobody was able to refute it, that if you allow the weak position to be the actual position. So if you allow weak atheism to be atheism, then you need to come up with a justification of why you won't allow weak theism to be theism, else you are, by definition, special pleading. Nobody's assailed that either, and neither has Matt. So, but at least he does make that distinction, right? He is making people aware. When he uses the term atheist, he's using it in the weak case. When I'm using the term atheist, I use it in the strong case. And the arguments have been such that in academia, it's understood in the strong case more often than not every single time. That's the usual standard understanding. Even T-Jump the other day, I had found somebody sent a video, and I'll play it if I can find it another time. But T-Jump had actually said, Steve's an idiot, but he's right on this. And I appreciate it. I even told T-Jump, I was like, hey, baby steps, thanks. He's like, no problem. I get along with T-Jump behind the scenes. And I'm like, okay, I'm an idiot, but you know what? I'm a correct one. And even said, yes, Steve's right that atheism is normally held in the strong case in academia. And I try to explain to people how these concepts are from a philosophical academic standing. Not that I have any qualifications. I'm not claiming expertise. I'm not, by any means, I'm a layperson. And I've said it a million times. I explain things from a layperson's perspective that if a layperson can understand it, you can understand it. That's the name. Bond says WASP is a good argument. Thank you. And I appreciate that. Again, I think it is a pretty solid argument. And all WASP argument is, which is the weak atheist special pleading argument, is that it takes Dr. Oppie's position and codifies it. Basically, all I did was I codified his argument, and then I added in an informal fallacy to it, which, again, most arguments are derivative. So, I mean, that's just how it is. You find an argument, you modify it, you change it. Same thing with math. You build upon other things, right? You add something to the dialogue. You add something to the discussions. Most proofs and things of that nature just don't come out of nowhere, right? I mean, things are derivative. So my arguments are derivative of Dr. Oppie's work and Dr. Demi's work, who did read my atheist semantic collapse argument, and he found no problems with it. So I was happy with that. Daniel Cooper says, can you elucidate? I love that word. Yes. Can you elucidate on weak theism for us? An example might help wrap my head around this. Sure. So weak positions and strong positions are logical positions in this particular case, meaning that the negator is not on the proposition. It's on the predicate. So the predicate is belief. That's the epistemic disposition, belief, right? So if I have believe P, right, believes proposition, that's a strong condition. If I have the weak condition, not BP, I'm adding the negator before the proposition, or before the predicate. So here's BP is theist, and then I'm taking the negation of that whole thing and saying not BP. Okay, that's a weak case. Okay, so it's the weak. So weak atheism is the It's going to be actually the subalternation of strong atheism. So let me try to work out the logic for you, because that may have been confusing. When you do normally a negation, you do it on the proposition. Okay, if I say P or the negator, that's not P. What they want to do is they want to take theism to be BP, take the negation of that, not the proposition, but of that, which would be not BP. So if you take the strong case of atheism, B, not P, which believes negation, right? Believes P is false, believe not P. The subalternation of that by semiotic square of opposition, which I show in my argument, will, by implication, by epistemic implication, it's not a strong entailment, and I don't mean to even come across as a strong logical entailment. And that's one thing that Dr. Demi and I did talk about. He did point that out. It's not. You maybe want to clarify a little more. He totally understood it, and this is how it's used, but just for clarification purposes, there's not a logical entailment there per se. It's more of an epistemic entailment or implication. But if I have believe not P, that implies I don't believe P, right? So if I believe the sky is blue, that implies I do not believe the sky is not blue. Now, there could be weird things with beliefs. This is why it's not a strong logical case, because beliefs can be weird. You can have conflicting beliefs, and you can have what's called peculiar reasoning. So it's not a strict logical entailment, but it is an implication. If I believe the sky is blue, I do not believe the sky is not blue. Okay? So weak atheism would be not BP. Strong atheism is B, not P. One is a subset of the other. Strong is a subset of weak. If you believe there's no God, you do not believe there is a God. Everybody make sense on that so far? Right? All right. So if we now understand what strong and weak is as applied to atheism, let's look at how it is applied to theism. If theism in the strong case is believes P, just like believes not P, it's just the same thing. You have to apply it equally here. This is what I'm saying. There has to be a reason why you don't allow this, because if not, it's special pleading. You cannot defer to semantics. You cannot defer, the dictionary says. You cannot defer to use of words. You have to stick with the logic. You cannot apply semantics to this. I had some dude on Facebook trying to do this, and you cannot do it because semantics are not applicable in logic, at least not verbal semantics. There's logic semantics, but words' meanings are irrelevant. It's intentional logic doesn't care about any of that. So when you have believes a proposition as the weak case, the strong case, the weak case is does not believe the proposition's false. So you have BP implies not B, not P. Not B, not P is weak theism, which means you don't accept the proposition false. It means you don't accept there isn't a God. In which case, if you allow weak atheism, which is I do not accept God exists, to be the case as atheism, then you must allow a theist to say theism is you do not accept it as the case that God does not exist. If not, that is special pleading. That's the WASP argument. So that's a differentiation between weak and strong. It's really where the negator is. So, hope that kind of works out. Do you guys when we're talking about weak and strong, what we're meaning? Just think of it this way: strong is the positive epistemic status, positive affirmation. Weak is the I'm not saying it's false, but I'm not saying it's true either. Right? That's, by the way, I've actually logically proven that weak theism, and agnosticism are all logically synonymous with each other. They're indistinguishable from each other by logical notation. There might be, epistemic status or epistemic reason that's different from the words and semantics. But as far as the logic is exactly the same. If you do not have a positive epistemic status, you're agnostic, and weak and strong atheists do not have positive epistemic status. This is why Matt gets it wrong when he says agnosticism has to do with knowledge. No, agnosticism is the position of not believing P and not believing not P. Agnosticism is the psychological state of being undecided on a proposition. That's how it is in literature. That's how it is in Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy by Dr. Draper. This is how it is in the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. This is how it is in every academic piece of literature dealing with the ontological status of God. Nobody disagrees I've ever met on that. If you're not dealing with the ontological status of God, then it can mean a normative epistemic principle or dealing with the knowability of God in the epistemological domain. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about on the status of God existing. If God exists or not, just his ontological presence. Agnosticism is always, 100% of the time in the literature and everywhere I've ever seen, means the psychological state of being undecided or suspending judgment on the proposition. And there's a paper called Suspending Judgment by Dr. Jane Friedman. Wonderful paper. Go read that, and it explains it quite well. This is why you'll never hear Matt talk about papers. You'll never hear Matt talk about these things by any academic levels. You're never going to hear him quote any of the people that I quote because all of them disagree with him. All of them. So... does that help?
Is the rejection of a proposition, it is not itself the assertion of a new proposition, then there can be no knowledge. There can be knowledge and agnostic and agnostic with regard to something like anti-theism, or that's not necessarily the same label that other people would use. But if your position is there is no God, I believe there is no God, and I claim to know it, then you could be a Gnostic anti-theist.
Okay, so I have to speed this up a little bit. So make a note there. Matt's using anti-theist to mean strong atheist. Which, by the way, watch how many words Matt has to change to make his schema work. He changes the normative uses of atheism. He changes the normative uses of agnosticism. And now he's changing the normative uses of anti-theist. Go look in the International Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Anti-theism is opposite of protheism. Protheism is a position that the belief that God exists is beneficial or that religion is beneficial. Anti-theism is a position that the belief in God is non-beneficial and harmful to society, and that religion is harmful to society. Or, right? So if you are somebody who believes that people should not believe God exists and that you're anti-religious, that would be what's called anti-theism in the literature. He wants anti-theism to mean the position God does not exist. Now, I can't say that I have not seen that term used that way. I have, but it's rare. Very, very, very rare. But I've also seen the term atheist used in the literature to mean naturalist. And it used to be that way. In older papers especially, you'll find in the turn of the century that the term atheist was actually used sometimes to mean naturalist, right? Now we know that naturalism will encompass and include atheism, at least from a rational point of view, right? If you hold that everything's natural, then you can't believe in the supernatural, and if you hold that gods are supernatural, then it would be nonsensical to say that everything's natural, but I believe it's a supernatural God, right? So there's an implication there that if you are a naturalist, you are an atheist, at least a metaphysical or ontological naturalist, not a methodological naturalist, which Matt is a methodological naturalist. So am I. So he makes it very clear there that he's using anti-theist to mean strong theist. But I don't understand why he does that, because we already have a word for that in philosophy. It's called atheism, but whatever.
And if you say, I believe there is no God, but I'm not claiming to know it, then you would be an agnostic anti-theist. And it's probably, for the people who are different. For the people.
Now, using his schema, he's actually kind of right on this, though. If you decide to use such bizarre terminology, which I highly will not recommend to you, I will dissuade you to I'm blue in the face to use such terminology. The term Gnostic anti-theist would make sense using how he's using it. If you use Gnostic as an epistemic modifier, which I don't think you should because it generally doesn't mean anything with knowledge, and then anti-theism is a positive belief. So you can only have a Gnostic theist, for example, if theism is the belief that God does not exist. If theism is held in the weak case, where you just don't believe, you cannot have a Gnostic theist. Same thing for an atheist. Atheism would only make sense in the strong case to have Gnostic atheist. Right? Because you can't know something if you don't believe it first. So this is why he has to do all these mental gymnastics, because he's locked himself in this box saying that atheism is the weak condition. And so because of that, you cannot have Gnostic atheists, because atheism is only used with him in the weak case. Although it's still obviously used in the strong case. If you believe there's no God, nobody's going to argue you're not an atheist, in which case Gnostic atheist would make sense in the weak case. But since we don't know what people are talking about about atheism any longer, thanks to groups like the ACA, when somebody says they're agnostic atheists, you may have to, or agnostic atheists, you might have to ask them what they mean by this, right? Because are you a soft atheist or are you a hard atheist? In the hard atheist condition, okay, I know what you mean. In the weak or implicit case, I don't know what you mean because it's nonsensical. This is what he's trying to argue, and he's right on this, but for the wrong reasons, maybe.
People who are getting ready to write in to say, oh, no, Matt, what you mean when you say atheist is non-theist. Correct. I use them interchangeably because words are tools and we get to use them, and it's descriptive of what we actually mean.
Okay, and that's fine. For him, he could use atheism to mean non-theism. But to everybody else on the planet that has an education in atheism and philosophy and epistemology, they don't use it this way. I don't think I've met anybody who does, who has an education in these topics. Because non-theism is the contradictory set of theism. This is where his logic just gets very bizarre. You have theism, and then you take the negation of that, you have not theism. That's a simple negation. You don't have theism, negate that, you get atheism. He's implying some kind of semantic instantiation to change the dichotomy there. The dichotomy is theist and atheist. Everybody agrees logically, or should agree logically, that that's the case. He's just calling semantically theism and not theism atheism. That's a semantic word game. Because in philosophy, you have theism and not theism, and then as a subset of non-theism, you have agnostic, you have atheism, you have ichtheism, you have apatheism, you have skepticism, you have ichtheism, which is a Dutch term, if I pronounce it right. You have all these different things that are in the subset of non-theism, and he's taking this the subset, the proper subset of atheism, and moving it to the superset, which is, I think, a BS logical move. And of course, Matt never addresses that. Nobody's in the AC has ever addressed that. No new atheist trademark, which I didn't create, has ever explained how you could take the proper subset of something and move it to the superset and to logically derive that from first principles. Hint, you can't. You can't. Go ahead, give it a try. Good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Was that clear, Lucas?
Well, yeah, I kind of use those words interchangeably too, but basically you're saying is what I would call agnostic atheist, you would call agnostic anti-theist?
Probably. That's the only way that the Gnostic and knowledge only makes sense as a subset of belief. And so if the word that you're using is not a positive belief, then I don't know how you can apply knowledge to it.
Yeah, and this again, he's right on this. Again, hashtag Steve is right, because I've been saying this for 5 years or more. If atheism is held in the weak case, if it's just a lack of belief, you cannot epistemically modify it with words like agnostic or agnostic. It makes no sense. It is ambiguous and it's nonsensical, because you do not have a belief there first to even modify. This is what he's pointing out. It would only make sense if you use terms like anti-theist in his usage, which would be strong theism, which I reject. I think it's stupid. But then you can modify that with terms like Gnostic or agnostic, because now you have a belief. But here's my argument, and he's aware of this. Let's assume you use anti-theist to mean a belief that God does not exist. Sure, you can modify that with Gnostic anti-theist. Okay, logically that makes sense. I don't have an issue with that logically or even epistemically. The problem is anti-theism already has a usage that means they believe against the belief of God, that the belief is harmful, religion is harmful. You have added this such ambiguity to the word that you don't know what the hell people are talking about anymore. right? Because people like myself who thinks anti-theist means something completely different, I'm like, what the hell do you mean by Gnostic anti-theist? There's nowhere in the literature that's used that way. It's confusing. So you have to outweigh the pros and the cons. Sure, you could use it in a mass way and it's actually coherent, but does it make sense to do so? Because it probably is incoherent to somebody else listening in going, I don't know what the hell you mean by this. Because anti-theist is not used that way. But the principle behind it is sound. In order to have a term like agnostic or Gnostic theist, theism has to be used in the positive case. Same thing with atheism. Atheism has to be used in the positive case in order to epistemically modify it. This is why agnostic atheism, in the weak case, is nonsensical, which I've said, again, for how long?
All right, I guess that's my confusion, because, I mean, as far as my understanding of anti-theism, like being an anti-theist, you are believing the positive claim. You're believing,
which is not true. You can have a theist anti-theist. You can have a theist who advocates for anti-theism. Therefore, it makes no sense to have the position anti-theist to be a positive claim, because then what happens to the theist out there going, wait a minute, I believe in God, but I'm also against the religion being organized religion. I mean, again, it's an and or, right? It could be both or it could be either or. It's a junction. You don't have to be against the belief of God to be an anti-theist. You can be against religion and to be an anti-theist. That is how the word is understood. Right? So there are theists that are anti-theist, meaning that they're theist in the ontological sense on the belief, but they're anti-theist as understood that they believe that religion is harmful and they practice their own thing. Right? So what about those people? They're going to have to change their label? Now, somebody can say they can call themselves irreligious or non-religious or anti-religious. Sure, but why when we already have a term for that? I mean, anti-religion and is anti-theism may include anti-religion or may not. It may just be against the belief, but okay with religion, right? Again, the term has multiple usages.
Yes, you're just withholding belief. But then, right. I mean, agnostic on top of that.
Agnostic can't apply.
I mean, okay.
It's like saying, this is a car, and here's a subset of cars that are Fords. Now, you could have a car that is a Ford. You could have a car that's not a Ford. But if you have a non-car, so an Apple, it doesn't make sense to say that's a Ford Apple.
Correct. Lando, hey, buddy. He says, hi, Steve. My favorite topic. Wish I could listen and participate, but work is heavy these days. Hope you're well. I am. Hopefully we'll re-listen and comment someday. I actually have free time. Yeah, when you free time, this is going to be a good video. I recommend this video to anybody who wants to understand why Matt and Dillahunty and I actually agree on this, that agnostic atheism is not a useful term. It is nonsensical in the weak case, and I argue it's superfluous in the strong case, meaning it doesn't add anything. If you already have the belief there is no God, you're not making a knowledge claim by doing so. So why do you need to have the modifier of agnostic? It's not modifying anything. What are you agnostic about? Right? It's not changing anything. It's superfluous.
Because Ford is a subset of car. It is not a subset of fruit. Or not a subset of everything that's not.
You have to have a car before you have a Ford, right?
But aren't belief and knowledge too close to be making that kind of analogy? Like it's belief and knowledge are so connected to each other that it's,
so are cars and Ford. That's why I picked that analogy. So are cars and Ford.
Yeah, and I'm okay with his analogy. So what he's saying is, in order to be a Ford, you must be a car. Okay, and by the way, you could be the analogy call it fails because there are other. I think you could be a truck. You could be maybe does Ford make a motorcycle? I don't know. But there are other things that Ford makes that are not cars, I'm sure. But let's just say, you could argue trucks are a subset of car. I don't know. But let's stick with his analogy here. Let's assume that all Fords are cars. In order to have a Ford, you must have a car first. In order to have knowledge, you must have belief first. All people that are claiming knowledge are subsets of people that have the belief first, because belief is a prerequisite for knowledge. So in order to have knowledge, you have to have that belief. In order to have a Ford, you must have a car. I agree with him on this. Strong atheism is a subset of weak atheism logically. It isn't epistemically the case, and that's where it gets a little confusing, but it is logically. In order to believe there's a God, you must first not have the belief that God does not exist. You must not have the belief that God exists, right? So all the people that don't believe in God are weak atheists. Then in those subsets, you have the strong atheist who believes there's no God, right? But I believe that very strongly that weak atheism is not a useful position because it's ambiguous. Because weak atheists are the same position as weak theists, which are the same position as agnostic. They're the same logical position. So I find it to be very vague to say I'm a weak atheist. Well, you're also a weak theist. You're also agnostic, logically speaking. Matt hasn't got so far to recognize that yet, though. Other people recognize that because I have legit proof on it, a mathematical proof. But if you think about it, it makes sense. If you do not have a positive epistemic status, you don't hold a belief either way. That is agnosticism on the proposition. He uses it differently, but again, we're talking about philosophical terms. Agnosticism being undecided. So if you do not have a positive epistemic status and you just don't believe there's a God and you're not making the positive claim that there is, or there isn't, I'm sorry, then the only other logical position for you to be is you don't believe either, which is agnostic. And again, you can logically prove this multiple different ways. Interesting, right? But Matt won't refute that logic, really, Matt? Will you, Matt? Nope.
All it was required is that one thing is a subset.
Where the apple came in.
It's not a car.
I'm sorry.
So it would be like saying this is a Ford thing that isn't a car. Well, there may be something like that, in which case the analogy falls apart. But generally, I'm saying if one thing is a subset of the other, that it doesn't make sense to apply that subset outside of it.
Yeah, and he's right, and he agrees that look, Ford makes some other things, and so if they do, then the analogy falls apart, and he's recognizing that, and I applaud him for that. Ozian says, Gnostic anti-theist doesn't make sense. Anti-theist doesn't require you believe theism is false. Yes, as we use it, as almost everybody that I've ever met uses it, sure. That's how the word is used in philosophy, right, Ozian? But he changes these word meanings to fit his own little self-imposed, just I don't know, his own lexicon, so to speak, I guess. His own lexicon is different from everybody else's. You can believe in a God and believe that organized religion is harmful and oppose theism. Yes. Yes, you can. That's anti-theism in the literature. Go read, go to the International Encyclopedia of Atheism, or Philosophy, I'm sorry. International Encyclopedia of Philosophy, IEP. Look up atheism, and it specifically says agnosticism, specifically says that anti-theism. No, I'm sorry. No. Let me correct myself. Go look in the International Encyclopedia of Philosophy under anti-theism, which has to do with the axiological thing of knowledge. It's an article called Axiological Knowledge or something like that. And in the axiological thing of knowledge, it mentions theism, or anti-theism being the position against religion, or belief in God, yeah.
Have you? Can I ask this? Have you seen? I'm sure you've seen it before, probably on Twitter or something. There's this like picture that a lot of people have put up on Twitter. It's like it's like a cross in like 4 different sections that will say agnostic atheist, gnostic atheist,
and here we go.
Agnostic theist, gnostic theist, and it will try to explain the differences between them. Have you seen something like that?
Yeah, for 20 years now.
And
by the way, I don't know if it's been around for 20 years, but I'm gonna grant him that. I think the first instances I've ever seen of the quad was I think there was from Usenet around the 2009, maybe 2006. I don't know. Maybe I try to look to find where these quadrants came up from, and the best I could find was somebody who mentioned that they first came around on the Usenet in the just after the turn of the century. So I don't think it's been a full 20 years yet, but I'm not going to quibble on it. But this is important coming up.
It's wrong.
It's wrong.
It's the sort of thing I would have shared once upon a time, maybe 15, 16 years ago, I would have shared it, but it's wrong.
There you go. Hashtag Stever's right, which I've said from how long Matt Dillahunty has agreed with me on this. The quadrant that you see, we have quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4, where you have belief, God exists, and you have the knowledge claim. So you have agnostic atheist, gnostic theist, agnostic atheist, agnostic atheist. That diagram is wrong. It is wrong logically, it's wrong epistemically, it's crapola. No university teaches it, no academic textbook has it, no paper uses it. The only time it's even mentioned is a smidgen of times. I've seen maybe, I can count on one hand how many times I've seen it. One instance, one of the original instances of it was a guy named Robert Flint, and I believe it was in 1903, in his book Agnosticism, and what he used the term was dealing with Huxley's usage of the term as a normative epistemic principle. So it has nothing to do with modern contemporary usage by these new atheists that are using these terms. And then Draper uses it in SEP on the atheism article to explain that maybe atheists rethink this. He actually is admonishing atheists not to use such terms because it's very close to fiatism. They just believe by faith that these things are the case. And maybe, like I said, 1 or 2 other places I've seen it. There's some papers out there I've read about, agnostic atheists, but again, it's very, very rare. Wikipedia is just nonsense on it. Whoever wrote the Wikipedia article is just all over the place. If you read the Wikipedia talk on that article, they're just like, this is crap. But nobody's gone in to fix the Wikipedia article. This is why you can't always take Wikipedia as true. But anyways, hashtag Steve is right. Matt agrees with me. The 4 quadrant is wrong. And I have in this video, in my blog, I have at least 3 or 4 blog entries where you can see why it's wrong using logic. And why it's wrong using, epistemic reasoning. And I have multiple different reasons why it's wrong. Matt only talks about one. He says it's wrong because knowledge is a subset of belief. He's not incorrect on that. That is one reason why it's wrong, but it's certainly not the only reason why it's wrong. And I go into great more detail why it's wrong. But I've said this for years to people. And they're like, oh, Matt doesn't believe that. The hell he doesn't. I know he does. He believes it's wrong. And he believes that, in his own words, when he's talking to Anthony Agnostic, he said that even though Agnostic Atheist is still on the Iron Chariots wiki, he no longer accepts that as himself. And he says explicitly that he finds that particular word combination to not make a lot of sense because knowledge is a subset of belief. He is right. So my advice to atheists out there using terms like agnostic atheist, my advice is you just stop, but you do you. But recognize that when you do use those terms, people that are educated in these topics are going to look at you like you're just an idiot. They really are. I do. When I hear somebody say agnostic atheist, the first thing I'm going to think is they probably don't know much about atheism, agnosticism, or philosophy. But I'll talk to them and I'll say, okay, what do you mean by this? But the fact I have to ask them what they mean by this, and I get 6, 7 different, 8 different answers, tells you how ambiguous the term actually really is. And nobody's ever made it make sense to me. I've had how many hangouts inviting people to come in and say, hey, look, explain to me what you mean by agnostic atheist and make a coherent schema out of it. Nobody's able to do that. Nobody has been able to do that. Not one.
Just like if you ask me about the Dawkins scale, that's wrong too.
Yeah, I have a blog on that too. I should have included that, but I didn't. Maybe I'll put it in the video description afterwards. But I have a video. I have a blog explaining why the docking scale is wrong too. Matt agrees. The docking scale is wrong. Anybody who knows philosophy has told me that, they don't like the docking scale. The docking scale is crap. And you still have atheists using it. Stop using it, but whatever. If you use it, at least understand you're using something that's crap.
I completely disagree with the Dawkins scale. I know what you mean there. Just as far as that goes,
even the college disagrees with the Dawkins scale.
I don't know.
When I say it's wrong, I'm talking in a very specific, pedantic, philosophical sense. Do I have a problem with the Dawkins scale? Not at all. If you say you're a 6.9, I know what it means.
Okay, now listen to that very carefully. He understands what it means when scale. And he's talking about a very pedantic philosophical. So he admits from a philosophical point of view, the Dawkins scale's wrong. I agree with him on this. This is what I wrote in my blog, why it's wrong from a philosophical scale and many other issues with it. I don't think it's pedantry, though. I don't think it's pedantic, because when you're trying to explain philosophy to people and they're using these non-philosophical things, then you have a problem. That's not being a pedant, right? Because if somebody says, hey, evolution just means change, and a biological person comes along, an evolutionary biologist says, no. In biology, evolution means a change of allelic frequency in any given population of species over a period of time, from generation to generation, or something changeable in heritable traits. That's how we use it in biology. So when you hear somebody use the term evolution just means change, they're not talking about evolutionary biology. And if they are, they're saying, well, in biology, it just means change. They're wrong. That's not being pedantic about it. Right? That's explaining the domain of discourse. So in philosophy, you can say what Matt's saying is just, I mean, he just uses crappy terms, right? But from a philosophical standpoint, I haven't seen anybody really argue for the Dawkins scale because I think it's crap, and he admits philosophically it's crap. Right? But if he says, okay, somebody says I'm 6.9, then he knows what they mean by it. You know what? I don't know what they mean by it. I kind of maybe sort of can glean, but I have never met somebody who uses the Dawkins scale that's really coherent in their justifications for their position. I'd like to meet somebody who can do it. I have yet to do so, though. Yeah, it's not pedantic. It's precise. Exactly, Chemo. Again, precision is important when you're talking about certain topics. I don't know why Matt has no precision in philosophy when he probably would in science. If these were scientific terms, why would he not have the same type of precision and usages? If somebody says, hey, Matt, theory just means guess in colloquial So all scientific theories are just guesses because that's how I'm using the word. He'd be up in arms about that. And if I came in and said, or even he came in and said, no, a theory is a well-substantiated body of evidence that has predictive abilities and explains natural phenomena by natural explanations. That's what a theory is in science. But if we said that, would we somehow be pedantic about it? No, of course not. We'd be precision about it. We'd be precise about it because that's how the word is used in science. Why is this any different from Matt? This is where I call Matt a hypocrite. This is where I call Matt a hypocrite. He'll have the same standard for science, same standard for biology, but he doesn't for philosophy. And then he gets mad at people that like myself who point out these things. And says I'm the bad guy for it. And I'm not even arguing we have to use these uses like this. This is an argument that Matt has made that he got wrong, that I wrote a letter to him and said, Matt, you got my position wrong. I don't say you must use words in any way. You could use anything you want, any way you want. I'm a descriptivist. He lied and said I was a prescriptivist. He never fixed that. He seems to force people to use certain words certain ways. I don't. Use words any way you want. But my argument has always been, if you use his terminologies, make some rational explanations and reason why these make sense to use this way. This is where it all falls apart. Because Matt, to me, cannot justify his usages. Matt cannot do it to me. Because he knows better. And I think it's dishonest, but whatever.
And that's the way we should be looking at all of this. For the people who are like, oh my gosh, we're back on the atheist, agnostic thing and all this other stuff. No. I don't care. There's a reason why I've had Steve McRae blocked for years.
Listen to that again. Let me even slow that down for you. This is where he goes off the rails.
Do I have a problem with the Dawkins scale? Not at all. If you say you're 6.9, I know what it means. And that's the way we should be looking at all of this. For the people who are like, oh my gosh, we're back on the atheist, agnostic thing and all this other stuff. No. I don't care. There's a reason why I've had Steve McRae blocked for years.
Because he gets my positions wrong and he can't argue against my positions. Because as I've argued for years, agnostic atheism was nonsensical. He now has my position. He has had me blocked because he will not face me to talk about these things. He has had me blocked because he knows my arguments are correct. People have told him my arguments are valid, they're sound, and he has no refutation. And they crap over his positions. Because if you want to take a philosophical course, you're not going to be using his usages. That's the problem. That's why he's had me block. I'm not an easy target for him. I'm not fruit on the ground. I'm not some theist calling up going, God exists, let me prove to you why, and fail because obviously theist's not going to be able to do that. So he blocked me because I'm a challenge to him, and I believe that very strongly now. And this is not some kind of G-man thing going, oh, I'm G-man, debate me. No, I have no interest to debate Matt Dillahunty. What I want to see happen one day is Matt Dillahunty put on his big boy pants, show my paper to be incorrect, and if he can't admit it, that my paper is correct, that his usages do lead to semantic collapse, that his usages are special pleading. But he'll never do that, obviously, right? He'll never do that. Would I talk to Matt about this? Yes. Am I asking him to? No. Because I don't think he's honest enough to do so. But the point remains is he's never refuted any of my arguments. There you go. He's just blocked me. Because, again, I'm much more of a challenge than he's used to.
I'm tired of people who are going to be like a dog with a bone over something when, and here, this...
Isn't he a dog with a bone? He's the one that's promoting his usages as normative. He's the one that's promoting his usages as prescriptive, it seems. I'm not. I'm not promoting them as prescriptive. I'm saying they're a normative philosophy, but use any words you want, how you want to use them. Words have meaning and they have usages. There's no intrinsic meaning to words. This is where he keeps getting my position wrong. Go ahead, do how you want to do it. But if you do, argue the schema can be logically coherent, show the syntax, show the semantics, and show that it's rational to use these things that way. That's where they fail. They can't do it. Because once you start changing all these words to mean what you want them to mean, there's ambiguity there. I'm not saying you can't do it, but explain to me how agnostic atheism makes sense when it can't make sense using it the way you're using it. And this is what Matt is pointing out to people. The way you're using these terms, it makes no sense. There you go. I mean, that's the whole point is, sure, you can do it, and he'll know what you mean by it, maybe. I don't think that he does. If you say you're agnostic atheist, nobody's going to know what you mean by that. I'm sorry. They just don't. There's 12 different ways I came up with what that could possibly mean. You have to literally explain what you mean by that. And so he has to, one, change my position, straw man them, which was one of the reasons why I wrote an open letter saying that you're straw manning me. He won't fix it. And 2, he'll never refute my actual arguments. Never. I don't think it'll ever happen. And he knows they're correct. This is one case where he knew my argument was correct. And I guarantee it. I cannot bet money on it because I can't prove it. But I can guarantee it, the people that he talked to about this particular subject, because he didn't go learn it on his own, the people he talked to were using my arguments. I guarantee it.
Completely on your side, Lucas. While in a very specific sense, it doesn't make sense to say, and I'm an agnostic non-theist, that does convey information to people that they can interpret as somewhat reasonably as, hey, I don't believe there's a God, but I'm not asserting that there isn't a God with any degree of confidence.
Okay. The problem I have with that is it's so ambiguous to look at it that way. If you say you're agnostic atheist and you're meaning atheist to be non-theist, then you have agnostic non-theist, right? It's just an instantiation. If you're using agnostic and atheism so synonymous that they are equal when they're not, again, atheism is a subset of non-theist. But if you're using non-theist as atheist, where they're identical in all aspects, which is crap, but if you're using it synonymously, then you have agnostic non-theist. But what information is that conveying? You're not conveying anything about your epistemic dispositions. You're not saying that I'm believing one way or another. Right? You're not changing anything as far as your modification. It makes no sense. If you say you're agnostic non-theist, you're a non-theist. Okay, that just means that you don't believe in God. You're not making any kind of positive claim. So what is it that the agnostic is adding to it? What is it that it's changing? What is it that's modifying? He's saying that it's saying that you're not making any claim of the negation. How does agnostic, as an epistemic modifier that's not modifying anything, relate that kind of information that you're not making a claim about belief, right? Because agnosticism in this case would be agnostic on the belief, not the knowledge. It makes no sense. It's just nonsensical.
And that's clear. It's like Arden and I were talking about this the other day, because we both have the same habit, which is if I say, oh my gosh, I did so bad.
It's kind of irrelevant.
Lee. I catch myself when I use bad incorrectly when it should be badly. And
so
I will, after the fact, add the Lee onto it. And she does the same thing. But at the end of the day, and she pointed this out, and I completely agree, it's not like the person misunderstood what I said. If I said, oh, I'm doing so bad, everybody knows what the fuck I'm talking about. It's only a pedantic grammar, focus that makes me make that change.
I agree with him on that. And I don't care about grammar. I'm not a grammar prescriptivist. Say I did bad or I did badly. I don't care. I loathe grammar Nazis. I hate them. I delete people that are just going to argue grammar, because at that point you're no longer talking about the argument. So yeah, we agree on this. Matt and I agree. Stop doing that. I don't care if you say bad or badly, because I know what you mean. But the problem is, agnostic atheist, nobody knows what that means if you don't understand that he's using it in a very different type of terminology. And same with the people using these phrases. I don't know what they mean by that. If I told Matt I'm an agnostic atheist, he's not going to know what I mean by that. It just means, he's going to know I'm a non-believer. But, it doesn't convey any information other than that. Because I've had people, even with Gnostic atheist, people have said, oh, Gnostic means certain there are no gods. There are some quadrants out there that means certain, not just knowledge, but certainty. Because they read somewhere along the line that agnosticism deals with certainty, which is a very small group of philosophers that hold any kind of certainty with knowledge. That's called the strong case condition for knowledge. Most philosophers don't accept that. They accept what's called a weak acceptance case for knowledge. And so they'll go to the extreme and like, oh, if you're not certain, you cannot be a Gnostic theist or agnostic or a Gnostic atheist. You have to be certain to have that kind of claim. No, you don't. You don't have to be certain to know something. Okay, but in their case, where they have the strong acceptance case, they have to say, oh, well, knowledge is a subset of certainty. Or you have to have certainty to have knowledge. And that's weird. That's just weird to me. Because certainty to me is the highest thing you can have, right? If you're certain, that's a bigger claim than knowledge, in my opinion. But whatever. All right. So we can get through here. But again, grammar, I don't care. So he's trying to lay this on other people, saying, oh, they're just being grammar Nazis when they're fixing this stuff. No, they're not. They're trying to explain the subject to people. I don't care how you use the words, but when you start using the words that are so bizarre and they make no sense, justify those usages. And then worse, if you're telling people that's the normal way to do it. And by necessity, when you start using words like necessity, you're just wrong by fiat or just. When I hear somebody say atheism is just a lack of belief, they're wrong. They're just wrong. Because it's not just. If they say atheism is lack of belief, then we could talk about that. But clearly it's not just a lack of belief because there are other usages. So that clearly is a false statement.
We should be able to play with language. We should be able to do it more.
The reason, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. No, I was thinking, like, the reason that I called is because I was thinking that it's more than just a pedantic language thing. Like,
it is. Like
the way I've only seen a few clips of you disagreeing with the label, but from what I've seen, it seems like the agnostic atheist label is completely wrong, and you would only use the atheist label. And it's,
that's about me personally.
I appreciate everything you say.
Listen.
Oh,
that's how I would personally identify. I do not identify as an agnostic atheist.
There you go. So all the people that came to my comment section over the last 5 days, because this has been a Matt Dillahunty week, that have said Matt Dillahunty is an agnostic atheist, you have now been disproved. This is only a year ago, by the way. This was from 2021. So all the people that said, oh, I watched Matt Dillahunty for the longest time, and Matt Dillahunty described himself as an agnostic atheist. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Why? Because, again, I could tell you it's a lot because of my argumentation. That my blogs and things that I've wrote and things I've been saying for the last several years has distilled somehow to Matt Dillahunty, because I know we know a lot of the same people that are experts in philosophy, and I know he does talk to them. So I would take your apologies for all the people that said out there, oh, Matt Dillahunty is an agnostic atheist. I would accept your apology if given. We'll see how many people do. I'm going to guess 0, but we'll see. But that's in his own words. He does not identify as agnostic atheist. He finds agnostic atheist to be nonsensical.
I point out repeatedly, I'm an atheist. I'm a non-theist. I may or may not be agnostic, depending on your definitions of knowledge, etc.
Yeah, see how he says it may or not be? Because, again, it depends on your definition. But he won't accept my definitions? I don't know why, because my definitions are what you would find in academia, which, by the way, describe. They don't prescribe. These are not prescriptive. These are just words. If you see the word agnostic on a paper, it's going to usually almost every single time mean a position of non-decision. Right? If it says agnostic on the proposition, if you go read in a paper, S is agnostic on the proposition, that means S is undecided on the proposition. That's what the conveyance of the information by the author means. That's how you do an internal critique. You can't say, oh, S is agnostic on P. Oh, that deals with knowledge. No. Now you're just misreading the paper. This is where the confusion lies in. This is why I've been so adamant about this stuff. Because what Matt Dillahunty and the ACA and other atheist organizations are doing is they're dumbing down people that if they want to go take these topics, they want to go read these papers, they're going to be reading the papers incorrectly if they're using their usages. That's why I'm so adamant about it. And then he's like, well, that's just being like relating to a grammar Nazi. No, it's not. It's like if you want to educate yourself in philosophy, like I had to do over the last 10 years, to understand these topics, and other people that happen to like these topics, stop being dumbed down by people like Matt Dillahunty that's using these terms so atypically where they make no sense. But at least he recognizes that my arguments were good on agnostic atheists, that it is nonsensical.
Okay, I guess I'm just curious about the label. Like, is agnostic atheist, is that a sensical label for somebody to use?
No, not in a specific, not if you care about precision in communication with regard to ideas and philosophical concepts.
Okay. Well, there you go, Matt. So what the fuck is your problem? Seriously, what is your problem with me when I've been saying that from a precise philosophical position, agnostic atheism is crap. It makes no sense. It's nonsensical. At the very best case, it's superfluous or redundant, and that's your best case scenario. But in the worst case, it's nonsensical. It's certainly ambiguous regardless. He's telling people a year ago that Steve was right, that from a philosophical point of view, these words make no sense together. So why has the ACA and the atheist community vilified me so when I've been right all this time? Riddle me this, because I'd love to hear the answer to that. I ask my audience, am I vindicated on the whole agnostic atheist thing, that I have been right on this the entire time? Let me know what you think in the live chat.
But if all you care about is communicating with other people what you believe, then it may in fact be useful I'm not even sure that any of the labels that we use are going to be useful in most circumstances, because I've run into people who are like, if I tell them I'm an atheist, I've literally had people say, "What's that?"
Yeah, and I don't know how that would be, but we'll grant him that. But it's just like, okay, most people have some conception what atheism means. Although I think if you ask the normal person what atheism means, they're going to probably say, they might say it's an atheist doesn't believe in God, but they're not prescribing that. But if you ask them, hey, what do you call somebody who believes there's no God? They're going to say an atheist, right? Because all people who believe that there are no gods would be constitutive of what would be called atheism in even common parlance, right? Because if somebody says they believe there's no gods, what else are you going to call them? You call them an atheist. Now you could argue, well, that they're an atheist because they don't believe, but not believing is not sufficiency for atheism in philosophy. In philosophy, the sufficient condition for atheism is the belief that God does not exist. The necessary condition is non-belief. These things are how it is in philosophy, almost everywhere you read. So Matt's recognizing these things. He does recognize these things. That in philosophy, to be precise, Steve is right, but he'll never admit that. By the way, feel free to tweet this everywhere. Take this video, put it on Twitter, on your social media. Hashtag Steve is right. Matt agrees with Steve. Steve's vindicated. Whatever you want to put down. Help a brother out.
People who don't know these labels, or people who don't know. Yeah. It's like, if somebody came up to me and said, hey, I'm a Southern Baptist, I wouldn't have to ask what's that, because I grew up that way. But there are other religions that I don't know by name, and I had to learn them some way at some time.
Yeah.
I did a video about labels, and specifically, I don't care what people call themselves.
Yes, he does.
I'm not overly concerned about people using labels.
If that's the case, then why have they hated me for calling myself agnostic, even though I'm a non-believer? I don't believe in God, but I'm agnostic. I'm not an atheist. Why is it they care so much about how I self-identify? When I have atheists coming to my page saying, oh, Steve, if you're a non-believer, you're by fiat, by necessity, an atheist. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. And so why is it they care about my self-identification? They expect me to accept theirs. Okay, fine. Use any labels you want. But they'll come to my page and tell me I'm wrong for self-identifying correctly with respect to the domain of discourse, with respect to atheology, with respect to philosophy, with respect to epistemology. That's ballsy. That's cojones. This is what I'm saying. The ACA has been derelict in their duties. Matt Dillahunty has been derelict as a position of power to explain these things to people properly. And that's why I find fault. I've had to, over the last how many years, explain to people these topics, and I'm not the only one. Answers and Reason's been doing it for a lot of years too. There's been other, even for, I think Free Flop blog, or not Free Flop blog, Free Flop podcast as well. There's been many different theist organizations that have been doing it as well, but it's all because the ACA has been putting out to people misinformation on purpose to confuse them. Even though they'll occasionally have a video like this where he admits, yeah, philosophically Steve's right kind of stuff, indirectly. He doesn't explicitly say that. But of course, he's obviously mentioned my name, right? That he's had me blocked. So he knows my positions, right? I mean, he's well aware of who I am. We've talked before. He's been on my show before. And by fact, I even asked him this very specific question before the debate that he had with Inspiring Philosophy. Do you still hold the position that agnostic atheism is nonsensical? I asked this before we started. He said yes. So I knew all this time that Matt Dillahunty was no longer an agnostic atheist and that he doesn't subscribe to those quadrant things that people show all over the place, which you'll never find anywhere, again, in any kind of philosophical textbook. So when people say that I don't know Matt's position, you're completely wrong.
And the key is, if the labels get in the way of a conversation, throw them the fuck out and use something else. It's one of the reasons why I invented Fergalbergal and Ergelbergal, even though I can't really use that anymore as a fully nonsensical thing. But yeah. All
right, well, throw them out. But here's the problem is you're the ones that help confuse people on it, Matt. The ACA has helped confuse people to learn these terms properly as you would learn in a college level course.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree on that labels are useless. Like that's literally, man, you have helped me so much in my conversion process, and that's literally the only thing I've ever seen that I thought we might disagree on, so I wanted to call in and ask you about the label thing. But yeah, I 100% agree about the labels there, what you're saying. So I guess,
awesome.
I guess
hang up on me then.
Not yet. One final question, and then hang up on me. So I do not believe in a God, but I don't claim to know there's a God, to know there's not a God.
Yep,
what's my
that'll work. Sounds like you're an atheist to me. You're my kind of atheist.
All right, to him. To him. To me, Again, using philosophical terminology, he would not be sufficient for atheism. Now, am I saying that he's not correct to use the label? I don't care whether he uses the label or not. He can call himself an atheist. I'll call him an atheist. I'll accept him as an atheist in his usages. But they don't seem to recognize that in accordance to what's actually understood in philosophy, he generally would not be considered to be an atheist. He'd be considered to be what's called a non-theist, because he's not a theist, and that's a dichotomy. But until we knew more about his actual beliefs, I couldn't tell him what he would be in philosophy. And people have done that. Said, hey, Steve, what would I be labeled in philosophical terms? And I've helped him work through that. But they've asked me to do that. So I'm not labeling him anything. I'm still going to call him an atheist, even though I don't know what his actual position is. I'm talking about Lucas here. I would have to talk to him what an actual position is. Because a lot of people who say they're not claiming there's no God, claim there's no God. I've seen a lot of hypocrisy there. So that's when the people will come to me and say, okay, hey, can you kind of help me formalize my epistemological position on this? I'm like, sure, absolutely. But notice how it said to me. I mean, Matt said to me. To me, he's an atheist, he said. Okay, well, to me, I don't know what he would be. To me, he's a non-theist. I can't say to me he's an atheist because I don't know enough about Lucas in his actual position to determine what his actual position is, but I'll certainly call him what he wants to be called as far as atheism. All right, so with that, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I do have to get ready for work, and I want to finish more coffee. Logic Zone says, it's just pointless to be an atheist and agnostic. Agnosticism is a belief. It is. It's a second-order belief, which, again, Matt Dillahunty, I think, is aware of, but he's, just keeps on saying agnosticism deals with knowledge. No, it doesn't. Citation, please. And don't cite me a dictionary. Don't cite me a dictionary saying gnosis, knowledge. It's not talking about epistemic knowledge there. And you cannot derive the meaning of a word strictly from its roots. That's called argumentium that's some of the etymological fallacy. Argumentium etymology. So you cannot take a word and say, oh, this word has to do with knowledge, which it really doesn't. Again, it's a special kind of knowledge, and say agnosticism deals with knowledge. No. Agnosticism has always been in the belief domain. Always, since it was created as a neologism by Huxley, it had to do with belief. It never represented anything to do with knowledge, ever. It was matter of fact, even if you talk about it in the epistemological domain and saying, well, agnosticism deals with the knowability of gods, where the gods are knowable. Even if you allow for that, which it is in the epistemological domain, it's that the proposition is a different proposition. The proposition is gods knowable or not? Agnosticism is a belief upon that proposition. Agnosticism is a belief on the proposition gods are knowable. Again, not dealing with knowledge, but dealing with dasastism, which is belief. So nowhere have I ever seen agnosticism deal with knowledge. When people say agnosticism and Gnosticism deals with knowledge, ask them what their background is with philosophy, because I guarantee you they have no understanding of these topics. I have never met a philosopher that agrees with them on that. Not one. If you're a philosopher and you think that agnosticism is a knowledge position of some kind or deals with knowledge, hit me up and show me a paper on this, because I've never read that. I mean, I've read agnosticism will deal with the knowability of gods, sure, but that's, again, a belief about the knowability of gods. All right, like I said, I'm going to end this. How long was this video? This was pretty short for a review. But let me know what you think in the comments section. If you agree with me, let me know. #Steve was right. If you agree with me on the comment section and on Twitter and everything else. But please review to this, or it's me, not review. Please, what's the word? Refer. I'm sorry. Please refer to this video next time you have somebody who says Matt Dillahunty is an agnostic atheist. They're misrepresenting his position. Go refer to this video when somebody says, oh, agnosticism deals with knowledge, refer to this video, or agnostic atheist makes sense, refer to this video. Because even Matt Dillahunty agrees with me, agnostic atheism is nonsensical in the weak case. So there you go. And read my blogs. Let me know what you think of my blogs as well. I break down the logic in great detail. One or two of them I'm not perfected on yet. I have an issue with one of them on the logical ambiguity of agnostic atheist. So somebody that finds a problem in the blog, the logical ambiguity of agnostic atheist, I'm okay with that. I'll fix it. I wasn't confident with that particular blog. I think I might have got it right. I'm not saying that I think I got it wrong, but it was so technical as far as the getting the predicate and the propositions right. There might be some room for improvement there. I had to reword it many different times. So if you find errors with that one, go for it. I'll fix it. Mea culpa. But the other ones, my arguments against the use of the ambiguity or the ambiguity of the nature of agnostic atheist, I think those are pretty strong. So let me know what you think, and thank you guys for watching. Good night.